Yeah, Jeff is actually an Airborne Ranger veteran, so he's a fellow airborne soldier, so who would have that? I'm going to open up also by quoting something from Article 6. And right after the point where Jeff left off, it says, the senators and representatives before mentioned, and the members of the several state legislatures, and all executive and judicial officers, both of the United States and of the several states, shall be bound by oath or affirmation to support this Constitution. So that is the oath requirement in the Constitution itself. And as Jeff alluded to earlier, part of keeping that oath doesn't involve just those in the military, obviously. It's everybody else, including us lawyers. And like Jeff, I feel the same obligation. Same reason why he served as an ACLU lawyer, and my hat's off to him for doing so. I've also gone out of my way in pro bono cases to defend the Constitution to the best of my ability under my oath. He alluded to also a change in, or a supposed change in the perception of the role of the 10th Amendment. But I'd like to harken back to something written by James Madison, who is rightly considered to be the father of the Constitution. It was his Virginia plan that became the heart and soul of the Constitution at the 1787 convention. This is something he wrote in 1798. And he talks about the duty of the state legislature. He says, it is their duty to watch over and oppose every infraction of those principles of the Constitution, which constitute the only basis of that union. And he says, in particular, in case of a deliberate, palpable, and dangerous exercise of other powers not granted by the said compact, the states who are parties thereto have the right and are in duty bound, not just a right but a duty, to interpose for arresting the progress of evil and for maintaining within their respective limits the authorities' rights and liberties appertaining to them. He wrote this in the Virginia Resolution of 1798. It doesn't sound like an enunciation of the supposed province of local government or state powers. It sounds much more like an obligation and a duty to defend the Constitution of the United States, and in particular, the Bill of Rights. Marine General Smedley Butler, the very famous winner of 2 Medal of Honors, once said, there are only 2 things worth fighting for. 1, defense of your homes. 2, defense of the Bill of Rights. That's it. He said, everything else is a sham. War is a racket. But he was still firm on that. Now, what was Madison objecting to and discussing in the Virginia resolutions? It was the Alien and Sedition Acts. Almost immediately, with the ink on the Constitution hardly even dry, and the First Amendment, almost immediately, a law was passed in the name of national security during the quasi-war with France that criminalized speech. And you had newspaper editors and reporters being arrested and thrown in prison simply for criticizing the president or his policies. Now, this is a law passed by Congress, signed into law by President John Adams, one of our great founding fathers. And do you think the federal courts stopped this? In fact, I just learned from Jeff earlier that Chief Justice Chase directed juries that they must convict. So you had almost immediately a breakdown in the purpose of the Bill of Rights. The preamble of the Bill of Rights is not in your materials, unfortunately, but it says right there, to prevent misconstruction and abuse of these powers. That is what the Bill of Rights was for. But almost immediately you had all 3 branches of the federal government directly violating the First Amendment. What do you do when that happens? What is your recourse? Simply elections? The answer of Madison and Jefferson both was no. The states have a duty. The people themselves, as we said earlier, are sovereign. And it is in their states they have a duty and an obligation to stand up and protect the people against such abuse. We are now in a direct parallel. The Patriot Act and most recently the NDA of 2012, which contains direct provisions that allow military detention and trial of U.S. citizens, is our modern day Alien and Sedition Act. Every bit as violative of our rights as what they suffered back then and resisted against. What is our recourse now? They're passed with overwhelming majorities in Congress, a bipartisan assault on our Constitution and Bill of Rights. What do we do as people? The federal courts? Don't look to them to defend you. They will not. They have not yet. To the contrary, they've upheld it. In the Hamdi case, the most recent case in 2004, saying there's nothing in the U.S. Constitution that prevents the U.S. government from detaining one of its own citizens as an unlawful combatant. Directly flying in the face of Article 3, Section 2, it says the trial of all cases must be by jury, and Article 3, Section 3, which says that treason shall consist only in living war against the United States or aiding and abetting its enemies, and no person shall be convicted of treason except upon 2 witnesses to the overt act or open confession in open court. So, directly flying in the face of direct commands of the Constitution, they're saying we can go ahead and treat the rest of you, all Americans, the same as somebody in Iraq or Afghanistan, like a foreign enemy in wartime. What do we do in this circumstance? This is, to me, far more important a question than local rule in a county or a town or even in the state as far as drinking age, things like that. That certainly is important. And I think Nikki's going to talk maybe perhaps a little bit about medical marijuana. Another very good example here in Montana. The people of Montana decided they want to allow it, but what happened? The federal courts, the federal legislature have all said, we can do what we want to, despite your best wishes. We'll come in there and do it anyway. We'll criminalize. We'll wipe you out. You have Chris Lindsay, a Montana lawyer and provider, now facing 25 consecutive life sentences for something that was legal in Montana under Montana law, passed by resolution by the Montana people. So, what do we do?
Too bad you can't clap.